I paid $15,000 to save my parents' house, but my dad kicked me out and said boldly, "You are not family. We will build our lives without you." Then my sister shrugged. "Finally, this burden is leaving us." I felt dizzy and shook. "Call 911, we don't need this burden." They giggled loudly. I just left. 2 weeks later they showed up crying at my door, begging me to talk. It began with a letter. Not addressed to me, of course nothing ever was in that house, but I read it anyway, because it was sitting wide open on the kitchen table, and my name was in it. It was from the bank. Final notice. My parents were 2 months behind on their mortgage, and foreclosure was about to begin. We lived in a 2-story house in a mid-sized town in Ohio. Nothing fancy, but it had a backyard with an old oak tree and enough room for everyone to avoid each other if necessary. I was 27 and still living at home, not because I was a loser, but because I'd stayed to help them. After college, instead of moving out of state with friends like I'd planned, I took a local job and started pitching in when I realized how thin things were. I knew they wouldn't come to me directly for help. Pride runs deep in this family. Still, when I saw the letter, I knew what I had to do. I had about $19,000 in savings. That money was supposed to be for my own place, maybe a trip to Europe, definitely not to bail out people who barely acknowledged me most days. But they were my parents. I went to the bank, got the exact amount, $15,000, and had the check made out directly to the mortgage company. No questions asked? I didn't want to hear them say no, or worse, pretend it didn't matter. I handed it to my mother while she was folding laundry in the living room. She barely looked up. She just said, "We'll see if it helps." "No thank you." "No, we'll pay you back." Not even a nod. A week passed and things started to feel different. They whispered more, disappeared for long periods of the day. My sister, Brooke, started giving me these smug looks, like she knew something I didn't. Then came Sunday dinner. We sat around the table. My dad put down his fork, cleared his throat, and said they'd made a decision. That I had to move out. That it was time for them to get their lives back on track, without my interference. His words. My interference. At first I thought I had misheard him. But then he stood up and said it, loud and clear. "You are not part of the family. We will live without you. We will build our lives without you." I looked at Brooke. She shrugged as if it was a relief. "Finally, this burden is leaving us." It felt like the table and chairs were starting to sway. Like I wasn't breathing right. My mom just sat there, sipping tea, like any other night. Then she looked at me and said, "Call 911, we don't need this burden." They laughed. Really laughed. I didn't pack much. Just grabbed what I could carry and left. I found a room on Craigslist that night and moved in the next day. Small, moldy corners, creaky floorboards, but at least it was mine. A week later, I got a text from my cousin Jake. "Hey, your parents were asking if you were still in town. I told them you were renting over on Eastwood." I didn't even reply. 2 weeks after I left, they showed up at my door, both crying. My mother had makeup smeared on her cheeks. My father's hands were shaking. They begged me to talk. I didn't let them in. But it wasn't over. Not even close. I stood behind the curtain and watched them knock. My mother had her hair pulled back, her face red as if she'd been crying for hours. My father looked smaller than usual, shoulders slumped, eyes darting around as if he didn't want to be seen. It was the first time in years that I'd seen either of them look vulnerable. But I didn't move. I didn't open the door. I didn't say a word. They stood there for maybe 10 minutes, waiting, whispering to each other, glancing toward the street as if someone might be watching. Then they went back to the car and drove off. That was it. No dramatic speech. No apologies shouted through the door. Just a quiet, awkward retreat. I didn't feel satisfied. Not yet. Just emptiness. That night my cousin Jake called. He sounded weird, like he was testing the waters. He says, "Hey man, your parents came by earlier. They were looking for you. I kind of assumed you were still in town, so I told them you found a place near Eastwood. Is that okay?" I didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Your mom, she was acting real weird. Kept saying you weren't feeling well. That they were worried. That you'd had some kind of breakdown." And just like that, everything fell into place. They weren't sorry. They weren't there to apologize. They were building a story. I told Jake the truth. Not just about the $15,000. Everything. What my dad had said at dinner. What Brooke had said. The way they laughed. The way my mom had called me a burden and told someone to call 911, like I was garbage on the side of the road. Jake didn't say much. He just took a long breath and said, "Jesus. That's a lot." After we hung up, I sat for a while, staring at my phone. The room I was renting was small, drafty, and the faucet kept leaking. But it was mine. Every bit of it paid for with money I should never have given them. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept going over every detail in my head. The way they dumped me after I helped them. The way they only showed up when they realized they were still drowning. The next morning I called the bank. I told them I was calling on behalf of my father. He was hard of hearing and needed help understanding his mortgage paperwork. They asked a few security questions. Easy. I knew all the answers. After all, I'd been the one paying their bills for years. What did I find out? The $15,000 didn't even cover what they owed. It just delayed things. It bought them a few months. But they hadn't changed anything. They were still in default. Another foreclosure notice was coming. And that's when it hit me. They weren't crawling back because they cared. They were desperate. They needed more. And this time, they thought they could manipulate me into giving it to them again. I wasn't going to let them. Not in the way they expected. I got a text from Brooke that afternoon. She just said, "Hey." I didn't answer. An hour later, another one. "Mom's not doing well. Can we talk?" Then, at 8 p.m., a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Brooke standing there with a bakery bag, the kind from the place I used to go on 7th. Inside were those almond butter cookies I loved and a little handwritten card. "Let's start over?" I opened the door an inch. She smiled, gave me this fake soft look, and said, "You might lose the house. For real this time. We were wondering if you could help. Just this once." I didn't say anything. Just closed the door. She stood there for a while. I watched her leave. I didn't sleep that night either. But not because I was angry. Because I had an idea. A clear, perfect idea. The next day, I updated my resume, printed copies, and walked into the local property management company that handled foreclosures and estate cleanups for half the city. I'd done my research. They had openings. I applied for a clerical position. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me access. Records. Case files. Property records. Contacts. I was hired in less than a week. By my second week, I was sorting through foreclosure files. Case numbers, property addresses, scheduled inspections. Then I saw it. Her address. My parents' house. And alongside him. Inventory and vacation are scheduled for 2 weeks. Seeing the house in the system didn't give me the rush I was expecting. It felt cold. Clean. Like seeing the name of a dead relative in the newspaper. All the memories attached to it, the backyard barbecues, the birthdays, the quiet late nights watching TV when no one else was home, none of them meant anything anymore. Just drywall and debt. But it gave me something I didn't have before, a timeline. 2 weeks. I started going through the files. It turned out my parents had ignored 4 separate notices from the bank. They'd applied for and been denied a loan modification. They had even tried to transfer the deed to a shell LLC that Brooke had set up. Amateur move. It was quickly discovered. They scrambled behind the scenes while pretending to me and everyone else that they had things under control. And now? The house was a target. A financial carcass waiting to be picked clean. I was just one of the people who would be carrying the knives. So I decided to sharpen them. I started working late and offered to do more of the foreclosure data entry. No one said no. The place was understaffed and drowning in cases. No one questioned why I was so interested in the logistics of real estate auctions. Meanwhile, my phone kept ringing. Brooke again. Then my mom. Then my dad. The voicemails started out sweet. Then worried. Then bitter. Accusatory. "You owe us after all we did for you. How can you leave your family like this? You're punishing us for asking you to grow up." I saved every message. 2 days before I was supposed to move out, I left a burner phone in their mailbox. Just a cheap prepaid phone with one number stored in it, mine. I attached a post-it note. "You wanted to talk? Talk." They called the next morning. I didn't answer. I waited for the message to go to voicemail, then I texted back. Remember when you laughed? Let's see who's laughing now. They didn't answer. I drove by the house that night. The lights were on, the curtains were open, like they were trying to show the world that everything was normal. There was a "For sale by owner" sign in the yard. Pathetic. But the next morning, the sign was gone. Taken down quietly. I guess someone told them the truth. They weren't the owners anymore. Then came the surprise I hadn't planned. Jake called. Dude, your parents are freaking out. Your mom went to the bank this morning and caused a scene. The cops were called. They say someone inside the system is working against them. Your dad said it might be you. I paused. Then I asked how they could suspect that. Jake hesitated. They found your name on some paperwork. Didn't say what. That wasn't possible unless someone in the office had gotten sloppy. Or unless I had gotten sloppy. I knew I had to work faster. That afternoon, I visited the house on the pretext of an inspection. The badge. The clipboard. No one stopped me. My parents weren't home. But Brooke was. She opened the door slowly. She looked different, no makeup, red eyes. Her voice was soft. She said, "We know it was you." I didn't deny it. She stepped aside. Let me in. The house was half empty. Boxes stacked against the walls. Furniture missing. They were trying to sell things before the final lockdown. I walked through the living room, past the empty hooks where family photos used to hang. She followed me. We're not going to survive this, she said. They're blaming each other. Dad's talking about moving into his brother's trailer. Mom's sleeping in her car. I turned and looked at her. You think I care? She didn't answer. I reached into my briefcase and handed her a sealed envelope. Inside, a printed copy of the $15,000 check. My signature. The mortgage account number. A line in red ink under the words, "Paid to prevent foreclosure 60-day extension." Her hands trembled as she read it. You ruined us. I leaned in. No. You did. Then I left. But the final twist was yet to come. 2 days later came the lockout. It's not as dramatic as people think. There's no SWAT team, no clanking chains, no broken windows. It's quiet. Administrative. A locksmith shows up with a company representative. If the property isn't vacant, the police are called to supervise. Most of the time, the people have already left. I volunteered for the job. No one questioned it. Too many files, not enough people. As we pulled up, I saw Brooke's car out front. No sign of my dad's truck or my mom's sedan. Just her. The locksmith nodded at me and asked if I was ready. I said yes. Then I walked up to the door and knocked, just for formality. Brooke opened it, looking like she hadn't slept. Her hair was in a messy bun, mascara smeared under her eyes. She didn't say a word. I told her she had 10 minutes to grab whatever she needed. She nodded and disappeared into one of the back rooms. I stepped inside. The place was stripped. Walls bare. It smelled of old fabric and tension. I waited. Then the scream came from the bedroom. Not Brooke's voice. My mom's. I ran in before the locksmith could stop me. My mom was on the floor, sobbing, holding a suitcase, rocking back and forth. My dad was standing over her, red-faced, shaking, trying to get it out of her hands. Brooke was in the corner, her arms crossed. My dad turned when he saw me. You did this, he growled. You think you're better than us now? You think this makes you a man? I looked at him. Then I pulled the last surprise out of my binder. A printed quitclaim deed. Not for her house, but for a small duplex on the east side of town. I'd quietly bought it 2 days earlier with the last of my savings and a short-term loan. Cash deal. Closed quickly. The name on the deed? Brooks. I handed it to her in front of everyone. What's this? She said, confused. This is your new prison. My mom stopped crying. My dad looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. I explained. The property was now in Brooks' name. But there was a lien on it. A fake one, strategically placed by a friend of mine in legal services. It wouldn't hold up in court for long, but it would tie her hands for months. Prevent her from selling, renting, refinancing. All she could do was live in it. I leaned in and whispered so only she could hear me. Every time you try to move forward, you'll stumble over my name. Just like I did with yours. Then I turned to my father. And you're not on anything? Not even the mailbox? The locksmith cleared his throat. Time was up. They left in silence, carrying what they could. No one spoke. No one even looked at me. I stayed until the locks were changed. But that wasn't the unpredictable part. The real twist came the next morning. When I opened my front door, there was an envelope taped to it. No name. No return address. Inside was a photograph. Me, standing in the office, photocopying foreclosure documents. My badge visible. The time stamp in the corner. And a note typed, not handwritten. You're not the only one who knows how to play dirty. Let's see how far you're willing to go. That's when I realized someone was watching me, too. The photo shook me more than I expected. I stared at it for a long time, just sitting on the couch with my coffee getting cold. Someone was watching me. In the office. That meant one of two things: either someone I worked with had turned, or my family had someone feeding them information. Either way, it meant I wasn't invisible anymore. I started going through everything: my texts, emails, call logs, old messages from Jake, even Brooke. Trying to find a crack. Something that didn't belong. After 2 hours, I found it. An old email I'd ignored, from a guy named Brian, an assistant I worked with in records. He had forwarded me a document from a case unrelated to mine and said, "Thought this was yours." I never opened it. It turned out that Brian had been talking to Brooke behind my back. They'd met a month ago at some bar. A casual thing, he said, but he let slip something about what I did at work. She had turned him. It was always Brooke. Always her first. That night I called Jake. Told him what had happened. Asked him straight out, had he told them anything else about where I worked or what I did? He hesitated. "I mean, yes. I mentioned that you got a new job. Said it was with a housing agency. Didn't know it was a big deal." There it was. The chain of breadcrumbs, right to my front door. I didn't scream. I just thanked him and hung up. Then I packed a bag. Took some time off work. Told my boss I needed a few days to deal with family issues. She didn't ask any questions. Everyone in the office knew the kind of mess we dealt with on a daily basis. I checked into a small hotel on the outskirts of town under a false name and left my phone in a drawer, turned off. I drove by the duplex that night. The one I gave to Brooke. It was lit up. A car in the driveway. But not hers. Inside, I could see through the front window. My parents were there. My mom on the couch, my dad pacing with a beer in his hand. Brooke wasn't in sight. Instead, a younger guy I didn't recognize was sitting in the chair laughing with them. I parked across the street and just watched for 20 minutes. They weren't suffering. Not really. They'd spun it again. Turned it into a twisted news story where I was the villain who destroyed the family and they were just trying to rebuild. My dad had always been good at playing the wounded father. My mother knew how to cry on cue. And Brooke? She could convince you the sky was green if it got her out of a problem. But something had changed. They were too quiet. That's when I noticed something: my name written on a piece of paper taped to the refrigerator. Not big, not bold. Just a little note. My name. A date next to it. An appointment? I wasn't sure. But I knew I didn't want to wait to find out. 2 days later, I got back to work. I pulled up every file I had access to and started looking at the paper trail. Property deeds, transfer records, mortgage payments. I was looking for a loophole, something I could use to flip the script, to put the heat back on them. And I found it. The duplex? It was technically deeded to Brooke. But there was a legal clause tied to the fake lien I placed. If she tried to transfer or sell it without legally removing the lien, it could trigger a city audit. Which meant that every document associated with the property would be pulled, reviewed, and if anything smelled fishy, investigated. I had copies of everything, including the day she and my mom tried to transfer the original family home into a fake LLC. That wasn't just shady. It was illegal. All I had to do was send a file to the right city clerk. But I hesitated. Revenge was addictive. But I wasn't sure if I still wanted to hurt them or if I just couldn't stand the thought of them getting away with it again. The next morning, before I could decide, someone slipped another envelope under my hotel room door. No photo this time. Just a flash drive. And a note. "Your mother called. You should hear it before you go too far." I stared at it for a long time before I plugged it into my laptop. What I heard next changed everything. The file was an audio recording. Poor quality, a little static at first. But the voices were clear. My mother on speakerphone, talking to someone from a local social services office. She was crying. Not like before, the performative kind. This sounded real. Cracked voice, short breaths between words. She was telling them that her son had threatened the family, that he had a history of aggression, that they feared for their safety. She said, "We have tried to help him, we really have. But he's unstable. He's dangerous." Then came the part that stopped me cold. She told them that I'd stolen the $15,000. That I'd forged the check. That I'd done it to control her, to manipulate her into signing over the house. She asked if there was any way to press charges. There was a pause. Then the voice on the other end said they'd need proof. Documentation. Signatures. She said, "We'll figure it out. We'll get what we need." And the call ended. I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. It would never end. There was no bottom. They were going to keep digging, lying, dragging me down until I couldn't breathe. My mother whom I bailed out. My sister who I gave a house to. My father who threw me out like garbage. They hadn't come back to help. They came back to set me up. And I almost let them. The next morning, I went to the city clerk's office with a folder full of documents. The fake LLC transfer. The full mortgage history. The check I'd written with a copy of the bank deposit slip. Everything, including the lien documents. I asked for a quiet meeting with someone from the audit department. I didn't have to say much. They saw the inconsistencies in the LLC, the illegal transfer of assets, the mismatched notarizations. They started an investigation. Word spread quickly. 3 weeks later, I got a phone call. The duplex was being flagged for title fraud. Brooke was called in. So was my mother. My dad tried to plead ignorance, but the trail was too clear. They'd tried to launder property through dummy corporations. Tried to forge documents. Tried to set me up. When the city finished its investigation, they froze the assets tied to the transfer. The duplex was seized. My $15,000? Still gone. But now it was officially part of the case. I was listed as a cooperating witness. They couldn't touch me. A few weeks later, I got a letter from the IRS. Someone had anonymously reported me for unreported income. Another stunt. I had my records ready. Cleared up in one phone call. But I kept the letter. Framed it. After that, it was quiet for weeks. Brooke disappeared from social media. My mom stopped calling. Jake texted once, said he didn't know the half of it, and apologized. We haven't spoken since. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from a lawyer handling the estate assets from the investigation. He said they had recovered some of the money during the seizure of the remaining funds of the bogus LLC. After court fees and state processing, there was a check for me. $3,721.19. I laughed when I saw it. Not at the number, but at the irony. After all the war, fire, and betrayal, I got back just under $4,000. Still, it was more than I expected. I used it to move out of town. Got a new place, small but clean, in a quieter town. New job. No one here knows my name. No one knocks on my door. Sometimes I replay that night in my head, the one when my dad said I wasn't part of the family. And I know he was right. I'm not part of their family. And I thank God for that.